Outlaws drew their guns. Too late they learned he was their leader, and marked them all as traitors. That is how the story was whispered, in smoky saloons and lonely ranch kitchens, across a frontier where the law rode slower than the wind and justice often came late, if it came at all. The year was 1887, and the canyon town of Dry Creek sat hunched beneath a sun that bleached the desert bones white. Buildings leaned as if tired of standing, their boards grayed and splintering. The street was a thin vein of dust, trampled daily by boots and hooves, and at night coyotes sang louder than the church bell ever had. Men here lived by their own rules, women endured what silence forced upon them, and children learned quick that promises meant little. Inside the only saloon, a low-ceilinged den thick with smoke, voices stirred like rattlesnakes. Lamps burned low, yellow light spilling across warp tables, catching on whiskey glasses and gunmetal. 7 men sat around a table at the back, rough-kit, the kind bred by hunger, greed, and too many nights on the run. Their boots were scarred, their faces dark with trail dust and unshaved stubble. They weren't brothers, though they called each other that. They weren't friends either. They were outlaws, and what held them together was only the glimmer of gold and the promise of blood. One spat tobacco into a tin can and growled, "The job's set for tomorrow. We ride at dawn, take the shipment before it clears the canyon. Richer than we've ever been, if everyone holds steady." Another man, with eyes sharp as broken glass, leaned forward, his voice low and cold. "And if someone don't hold steady? I've been smelling rot in this group. Someone's been thinking about talking to the law." The table stiffened. Chairs scraped. Hands hovered close to pistols, fingers twitching. The air grew heavy, thick enough to choke. No one spoke first, no one wanted to, because in silence suspicion spread faster than words. At the far end of the room, shadows clung to a man sitting alone. The light barely touched his face. He hadn't spoken all evening, hadn't lifted his head when the whiskey was poured. His hat brim kept his eyes hidden, but his stillness was louder than the boasts and threats around him. He sat with the patience of stone, the quiet of someone who had seen storms blow over and men bury themselves in their own lies. Back at the table, the arguments rose like desert wind before a dust storm. One outlaw slammed his fist. "We can't keep splitting the gold the same way. Some of us do the work, others ride light. I say tomorrow, whoever proves himself keeps the lion's share." "That's easy to say," another sneered, "when your trigger hand shakes like a leaf in wind. Maybe tomorrow you won't be here to collect nothing." The first man shoved his chair back, half rising. Guns glinted in the lamplight as more hands edged closer to grips. The piano stopped mid-note, the card game at the next table froze, and the barkeep ducked behind the counter with the weariness of a man who'd seen too much blood clean off wood floors. "You talk of loyalty," the broken glass-eyed man hissed, "but I remember last winter, you ran when bullets started flying. I say a coward don't deserve a cut." A growl spread among them, low and guttural, like wolves about to turn on each other. Each man's eyes were narrowed slits, suspicion carving lines deeper into their faces. Sweat gleamed on foreheads despite the coolness of the night air outside. They were bound together, yes, but barely. They had been stealing long enough to know that trust among thieves was thinner than desert rain. The shadowed figure shifted at last, boots scuffing against the floorboards. No one turned to him. Not yet. His presence was too familiar, too overlooked, as though they had forgotten he was there at all. He reached for his glass, lifted it slowly, and the whiskey caught a glimmer of light. His hand was steady, his shoulders relaxed. If anyone had looked close, they might have seen the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth. But no one looked. Not yet. The outlaw with the sharp eyes slammed his palm on the table. "Tomorrow, any man who falters gets marked. We ain't carrying dead weight no more. If you can't draw quick enough, if you hesitate even a breath, you're no brother of mine. You're a traitor. And traitors don't ride back with the living." A murmur of agreement rolled around the table, though unease lingered in their throats. They puffed their chests, nodded hard, masking fear with bravado. Each thought himself the fastest, the most loyal, the only one fit to lead if the group fractured. The sickness of betrayal already poisoned them, though none dared admit it aloud. From the street outside came the hollow thud of hooves, the sound echoing between the sagging buildings. A door creaked open somewhere, a woman's laugh cut short by the slam of shutters. Dry Creek was a town that listened, and tonight it heard the storm brewing in that saloon. Back at the table, whiskey sloshed, dice rattled in nervous hands, and pistols rested like hungry wolves waiting to bite. The men boasted louder now, about their speed, about how many they dropped in past fights. Each word was meant to scare the others into silence. Each story was a warning. One outlaw leaned close, breath sour, voice dripping venom. "I don't care who stands in front of me tomorrow, lawmen, settlers, even one of you. I'll put a bullet through anyone who looks at me wrong." The others laughed, a hard, brittle sound. But the shadowed man didn't laugh. He tilted his head, listening, memorizing each vow, each crack in their armor. The night outside stretched black and endless, the desert stars glinting sharp as knives. Within the saloon, the storm gathered, silent and invisible, but certain. Tomorrow would come. And when it did, guns would be drawn. But by then, it would already be too late. For among them sat the men they thought forgotten, the leader they betrayed, the one who had come not for gold, but for judgment. And though they laughed and bragged of their speed, they had no idea that before long their names would be carved into memory, not as outlaws, but as traitors. The whiskey burned down throats. The night dragged deeper. And in that canyon town where law was a shadow and trust a ghost, 7 men made promises to kill. None of them noticed that the storm had already broken, and that its eye was sitting silent among them, waiting for the hour to strike. He came in at dusk, just as the sun was bleeding into the canyon rim, and the dust shimmered like smoke across the hard-packed road. One man, alone. No wagon, no saddle horse, just a faded trail coat draped over his shoulders like a worn shroud, and boots that dragged through the dirt as if they'd forgotten the feel of rest. His face was tanned like rawhide, lined and quiet, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a beaten black hat. Every step echoed too loud in the silence of Dry Creek, where most men rode in or didn't come at all. The townsfolk watched from porches and behind cracked window panes. An old woman stopped sweeping her stoop, broom frozen midair. A boy with a wooden toy gun lowered it, mouth parted. At the blacksmith stall, hammers stopped ringing. Even the dogs that roamed the alleys slunk into shadows. He wasn't big, wasn't fast, didn't speak, but something in his gait, in the hush that followed him like a funeral hymn, made the town lean back and squint hard. "Another man heading for trouble," muttered a rancher, spit dark on his lip, not taking his eyes off the drifter. "Or trouble heading for him," someone else replied, quieter. He passed the general store without glancing up, dust curling at his heels like a slow-moving fog. His boots were scuffed raw at the toes, soles almost flapping. His coat was stitched at the sleeve with mismatched thread, his hands calloused and marked with years of sun and blade. He didn't wear a gun on his hip, not visibly, but his silence cut sharper than any steel. Something about him told you he didn't need to draw first. Or maybe he never needed to draw at all. He paused outside the saloon, that same stale 2-story place where the outlaw gang had made their nightly roost. Behind its swinging doors were the men who bragged of how fast they could kill and how deep they could bury. Laughter rang out from inside, hollow and mean. The stranger didn't blink, just tilted his head like he was listening to a song only he could hear. Then he moved on, slow and sure, stepping up the saloon's creaking porch and pushing through the doors like he'd walked through them 1,000 times in another life. The room didn't fall silent, not right away. It took a second for the gang to notice him, and another for the rest to sense the shift in the air. But the moment hung, long and unblinking. He didn't order a drink, didn't sit, just stood at the edge of the room, watching, those eyes, now visible beneath the hat brim, old and unreadable. Not cold, not warm, just watching. The barkeep, a wiry man with burned scars along his forearm, gave a cautious nod. "Can I help you, stranger?" No answer. The drifter's gaze flicked to the back table, where 7 men sat hunched over whiskey and cards, their voices hoarse from laughter and lies. He stared at them, long and steady. One outlaw, the youngest, noticed first and stiffened. The others followed. "Friend of yours," someone muttered to the sharp-eyed leader. He turned, eyes narrowing. "Never seen him before." "He's seen us," the younger man said under his breath. "Too much," another growled. The drifter didn't flinch. If he heard them, he gave no sign. Just stepped forward, slow and easy, boots tapping the worn floorboards. He stopped near the bar and turned his back on them, not out of disrespect, but the kind of confidence that only came from knowing you were in control before a word was even spoken. A murmur passed through the room. The piano player faltered and went quiet. The dealer paused his shuffle. Outside, the wind stirred the dust again, and in it came the memories this town tried hard to forget. Of nights when gunfire snapped like bone in the dark. of barns burned and women crying and men buried in shallow graves behind the chapel. The people of Dry Creek didn't speak of the raids anymore, not because they forgot, but because they remembered too well. The wounds never healed. They just learned to keep moving. This man, this stranger, stirred those ghosts without lifting a finger. At the back table, the outlaws shifted, unease crawling into their boots. They didn't know his name, but they felt the threat in his silence. It wasn't challenge, it was knowledge. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was waiting for one. The sharp-eyed leader leaned forward, eyes narrowing, hand ghosting over his pistol. "You got a reason to be staring, stranger?" The drifter didn't turn, didn't answer. He just took the glass the barkeep slid his way, held it up, and then, slow as dusk falling, he poured it out onto the floor. Every drop hit the wood with a soft thud. The message didn't need words. The gang stood, nearly in unison. "Something wrong with our company," another spat, stepping forward. No response. Another man stepped closer, hand twitching by his holster. "Maybe you're lost. Maybe you don't know who we are." The drifter turned his head just enough to speak, voice low and steady. "I know exactly who you are." 6 words. That's all. The youngest outlaw took a step back. "I don't like this," he muttered, throat tight. The leader sneered. "You think you scare us with riddles, old man." The drifter finally faced them fully. His eyes, those weathered, storm-worn eyes, met each of theirs, one by one. Not threatening, not judging, just marking. Like a man counting the names on a list he'd carried a long time. He didn't say another word. The saloon held its breath. The gang stiffened. And somewhere in the back, a woman whispered, "He's not here for a drink." The wind pushed through the door and scattered a few playing cards across the floor. One landed face up at the drifter's feet, the ace of spades. Death's card. From the back of the group, one of the outlaws leaned toward the leader, whispering, "He's seen too much." The drifter didn't move. The mun beside him flinched. The leader's jaw tightened. Then tomorrow, he dies with the rest. And with that, the gang filed out, muttering, spitting, swearing, but not laughing anymore. The drifter watched them go, his expression unreadable. Only the barkeep dared speak once they were gone. "You know who they are." The stranger set the empty glass back on the counter. "Better than they know themselves." And with that, he turned and stepped out into the dust again, as the night closed in like a noose. The canyon looked like it had been carved by an angry god, harsh ridges clawing toward the sky, jagged rocks stacked like teeth, and wind whistling through the cracks with the sound of lost souls. The sun hadn't yet cleared the eastern rim, but the outlaw gang was already there, crouched low in the reddish sand, rifles angled toward the narrow trail below. Their horses were tied off behind scrub brush, stamping and snorting with unease. The air was thin with silence, but heavy with what hadn't yet happened. "We hit him right as he rounds that bend," muttered Clay, the lean one with the twitchy hands. "Single wagon, no outriders. Easy pickings." The leader, Jeb Carver, didn't answer. He just stared down the gulch with narrowed eyes, as if measuring the dust itself. His mind wasn't on the traitor they were waiting for. It was on the stranger from the saloon, the one who didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't speak more than a handful of words, and yet somehow unsettled every man at the table. Jeb didn't like being unsettled. It made his trigger finger itch. Behind them, Sam leaned against a rock, loading shells slow and loud. "You really think we should be splitting this 6 ways?" he said, not looking up. "This haul's bigger than we've ever touched." 5 ways, corrected Tuck, grinning without warmth. "Clay won't make it out. Too soft in the gut." Clay spat in the dust, face red. "I've killed more men than you've tied boots, you jackal." Jeb turned, slow and deliberate. "You want to settle that now?" he asked, hand resting light on his pistol. The group went still. "No," Clay mumbled, backing down. "Not now." Jeb turned back to the canyon's mouth. "Then shut your damn mouth. This job goes clean. Then we talk cuts." They didn't see the stranger, not yet. He'd been riding since before dawn, quiet and distant, keeping to the high ridgelines where the shadows hadn't yet let go. His coat flapped with the rhythm of the wind, his horse moving at a ghost's pace. He watched them from above, a lone silhouette against the rising sun, framed in gold and silence. He didn't come for gold. He came because he knew what was about to happen, and what was hiding beneath it. Below, the outlaw gang waited with breath held tight and mouths dry. The plan was simple. A trader with 2 mules and a small chest of gold would cross the canyon trail just after sunrise, and they'd take him down clean. But what none of them admitted, even to themselves, was that this job had a second layer. Jeb had already whispered to Tuck. Some had talked to Clay. Everyone had someone they didn't trust, someone they planned to shoot just a second too late. It wasn't going to be a robbery. It was going to be a purge. The wagon came into view at last, a creaky wooden cart bouncing between ruts. But it wasn't a trader riding it. It was a family. A man with a thick beard and calloused hands held the reins. His wife sat beside him, clutching a worn shawl. In the back, 2 small boys clutched bags of grain and blinked toward the canyon walls. Clay stood suddenly, confused. That ain't no trader. Sam's voice was tight. Where's the gold? They're settlers, murmured the youngest, Elroy. Goddamn settlers. We were told, Tuck started, but Jeb cut him off with a snarl. Too late now. The wagon rolled beneath the ridge. The father glanced up, just in time to see the glint of rifles. His eyes widened. Wait, Clay shouted. Don't. The first shot rang out anyway. A bullet slammed into the wagon's side. The horses screamed and reared. The woman shrieked. One of the boys fell back, clutching his ear. The canyon erupted. Shots fired from every direction, ricocheting off rocks, sending dust clouds high into the air. The wagon tipped, one wheel shattering against a stone. The father jumped down, yelling, reaching for his wife. Another shot split the air, and he dropped, a crimson blossom spreading across his shirt. And then, from the ridge above, a single shot cracked like thunder. One of the outlaws spun where he crouched, rifle flying from his hands. He hit the dirt hard, a clean hole in his shoulder. Jeb turned, startled, eyes raking the canyon edge. There he was, the stranger, standing tall, rifle balanced against his hip, eyes calm and cold as winter rain. He fired again. Tuck fell back screaming, hand blown open as his pistol clattered from his grasp. The remaining outlaws scrambled for cover, but the stranger was already moving, sliding down the canyon slope with a precision that didn't belong to ordinary men. His steps were sure, his eyes locked, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade through linen. Another shot. Sam screamed as his thigh exploded with pain. Clay crawled behind a boulder, sobbing. Who is he? Who the hell is he? The stranger reached the wagon in seconds. He ducked behind it, checking the wounded father, still breathing. The woman sobbed over him, blood on her dress, shaking with terror. Keep your head down, the stranger said, voice low but firm. He looked to the boys. One was bleeding, grazed in the shoulder, but alive. The other clutched a small Bible, his lips moving without sound. Above, Jeb growled through his teeth. It's him, he whispered. Elroy, pale and shaking, looked over. Him who? Jeb didn't answer. The stranger moved like he was born to this canyon. He drew a pistol from beneath his coat, long and black with a worn handle. His aim was terrifying. Each shot disarmed but didn't kill. Flesh wounds, shattered weapons, near misses that pinned men without burying them. He wasn't here to butcher. He was here to end something. The gang broke. One by one, they fled, bleeding and howling, tripping over each other as they scrambled toward their horses, toward any path that didn't lead to him. Jeb stayed. He wasn't running. Not yet. The stranger walked toward him, gun lowered, eyes locked. Every step closed a chapter Jeb hadn't realized was still being written. Elroy's voice trembled. It can't be, not him. Jeb swallowed. It is. The canyon held its breath. The stranger said nothing. He didn't need to. The dust swirled between them like memory itself rising from the earth. And Jeb, for the first time in years, felt something deeper than fear. He felt the weight of recognition. Before he became a ghost, they called him Boone. Boone McGraw. The name had once stirred campfire tales and tightened the grip on every sheriff's rifle west of the Rockies. He wasn't the fastest draw or the cruelest hand, but he was something worse, calm. Always calm. Where other outlaws blustered and drank and barked about blood, Boone watched. Listened. Then, without flourish or noise, he acted. And when he did, men disappeared. He rode with a gang once, long before Dry Creek forgot how to say his name. Not the gang now nursing whiskey and ego in the saloon, but the same men, just younger, hungrier, less certain in their cruelty. They weren't brothers even then, just drifters circling Boone's fire because he had the mind for planning and the steel to see things through. He gave them gold, gave them freedom, taught them silence, and they gave him a bullet. It happened on a ridge 3 winters ago, near Santa Fe. A gold wagon they'd hit went bad. No law, no shootout, just greed. Jeb Carver whispered into Sam's ear, and Sam passed the word to Tuck, and when Boone stepped down to check the chest, they fired into his back. 1, then 2, then 3. He fell without a word, face first into the snow, blood blooming beneath him like a slow red rose. They didn't check his pulse, didn't bury him, just took the gold and rode off, leaving him to freeze beneath the gray sky. But Boone didn't die. A trapper found him days later, barely breathing, black with frostbite and silence. The old man never asked his name. Boone never gave it. He stayed through the healing, learned to walk again with pain burning through every step. And when spring broke, so did Boone. He left the trapper's cabin with a limp and a hunger. Not for gold. Not even for revenge. For the truth to be known. Now, in Dry Creek, the old ghosts stirred. They whispered through alleyways and back porches. The blacksmith's boy said he saw the stranger from the canyon cleaning blood from his coat with a cloth that bore the McGraw brand. A saloon girl swore she recognized the scar under his eye, the same one Boone got from a Comanche knife 10 years back. And the barkeep. He just kept polishing his glasses and shaking his head. Boone's dead. Jeb growled for the 10th time that day, pacing behind the saloon like a wolf caught in its own den. I shot him myself. We all saw the blood. He didn't scream, muttered Clay, pale and sweating. I remember that. He didn't even scream. Tut drank deep, whiskey sloshing over his lip. What if he didn't die? What if he just waited? Jeb stopped. He ain't waited. He's gone. But the way he said it wasn't convincing. The others heard it too. Inside the saloon, the mood had shifted. Cards were played softer. Laughter came nervously. Every time the door creaked, someone's hand jumped to their belt. They drank more, talked less. Boone's name still wasn't spoken above a whisper, like saying it too loud might summon him. Because Boone was never loud. Boone was the silence before thunder. Then, one night, just after the sun dipped and painted the windows with gold, he walked through the doors. No announcement. No music. Just the sound of boots on wood. He didn't wear a mask. Didn't bother with disguise. His coat was the same, his gait stiff but sure. The saloon didn't breathe. Even the lamp flames seemed to freeze. He walked to the center of the room. Turned slowly. His eyes scanned the room, calm as still water. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was looking for memory. Recognition. He found it. Clay backed into the wall, nearly knocking over a chair. Tuck stood, knocking over his drink. Jeb's face hardened, but his hand trembled by his side. The whispers would be loud tomorrow, but tonight there was only hush. Only the creak of wood under Boone's boots and the rush of blood in guilty ears. He reached the bar, nodded once to the barkeep. Whiskey. The barkeep poured it without speaking, hand shaking. Boone sipped, slow. Eyes never left the mirror behind the bottles, where the gang's reflection trembled like shadows in wind. Can't be, Tuck finally said, choking on his breath. He's dead. Jeb swallowed hard. Maybe he never was. Clay drew in a breath. What do we do? Wait, Jeb muttered. He'll leave. He don't want trouble. But Jeb didn't believe his own words. Because Boone hadn't come for trouble. He was the consequence that followed it. They'd spent years erasing him from memory, taking his maps, his methods, his name. They told themselves they were better off without him, freer. But now, looking at him, standing there like a mountain returned from mist, they saw what they'd tried to bury. He wasn't the one who needed them. They were the ones who needed him. And they betrayed him anyway. Boone finished his whiskey, set the glass down, turned. The room shifted, like the breath of the world sucked in all at once. Jeb's hand twitched. It was a small motion, barely a breath. But Boone saw it. And before the gun could clear leather, Boone's hand was already moving. Smooth, graceful, no panic, no fire. Just truth. The hammer cocked. The gang knew then what the town had feared. The mask wasn't hiding him. It was hiding them. The saloon exploded before the whiskey glass hit the floor. Jeb's pistol barked first, but Boone was already in motion, his hand a blur, body low, coat sweeping behind him like a shadow torn from the earth. Wood splintered. Lamps crashed to the ground, shattering in a rain of fire and glass. Bullets screamed past as the world inside the saloon became heat, smoke, and panic. Chairs flew. A mirror shattered, raining silver teeth onto the bar. Patrons dove beneath tables, screaming, crawling through dust and broken glass as the air filled with gunpowder and fear. One outlaw's shot went wild and punched through the piano, silencing its drunken song forever. Boone didn't waste bullets. His revolver coughed twice. One man's gun flew from his hand. The second crumpled to his knees, moaning, shot clean through the thigh. Tuck tried to flank him, eyes wide and teeth bared in panic, but Boone's boot struck the table, flipping it into his path. Tuck stumbled, and Boone's fist met him mid-fall, snapping bone with a dull crack. "Jesus!" someone yelled. "It's him. It's really him." Clay was already crawling toward the back door, face pale and soaked with sweat. Boone turned his head just slightly, and Clay froze mid-crawl. Their eyes met. Clay dropped his weapon and raised both hands. I wasn't part of it. I just rode along." Boone didn't answer. He never raised the gun. Just moved on. Another outlaw lunged from the shadows, a knife flashing. Boone stepped inside the strike, twisted the man's arm until the blade clattered across the floor, and shoved him hard into a row of chairs that collapsed beneath him. Every movement was precise, deliberate, no waste, no hesitation. He fought like a man who'd already counted his targets, already imagined the angles of every fall. Jeb fired again, snarling like a cornered animal. The bullet grazed Boone's coat, searing the edge of his sleeve, but Boone didn't slow. His revolver roared once more, and Jeb's shoulder jerked backward as the gun flew from his grip. He screamed, clutching his arm, retreating toward the far end of the bar. Smoke coiled through the rafters. The saloon stank of blood and splintered wood. The remaining outlaws, what few hadn't fled, now stood frozen, weapons slack in trembling hands. One of them, no older than 20, stared at Boone like a man staring into the eyes of judgment itself. Boone walked toward him, slow and steady. His revolver hung at his side. The boy swallowed. I didn't know what they did. I was just—" Boone stopped before him. "What's your name?" "Elroy." He looked the boy over, eyes narrowing, not cruel, but tired. Tired in the way a man gets after dragging too many memories too far across the land. "You still got a choice, Elroy," he said, voice like gravel over truth. "Don't live with the stain of their betrayal." Elroy dropped his gun and backed away like a man stepping out of a dream. He disappeared into the broken door, into the night, into a silence he hadn't earned but had been given anyway. Behind Boone, the town had gathered, faces framed in the shattered windows, behind the batwing doors, peering in from the dark. Mothers with children, shopkeepers with shaking hands, widows with tight lips and wet eyes. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them moved. They had seen gunfights before. But this wasn't that. This was something else. Not revenge. Judgment. And they knew it. Boone turned slowly. The floor was littered with moaning men, broken chairs, spilled blood. The saloon lights flickered like dying stars, casting long, warped shadows across the walls. And in that ruin of smoke and fear, only one man still stood. Jeb Carver. He leaned heavy against the bar, sweat pouring down his face, eyes glassy with disbelief. His right hand hung limp, shoulder torn by Boone's bullet. His mouth worked like it wanted to spit hate, but found only silence. "You drew your guns too late," Boone said, low and steady. "You drew them against me." Jeb's breath rattled. We buried you." "You buried the men who trusted you," Boone replied, "but not the one who remembers." Jeb laughed, sharp and broken. "What now? You gonna kill me, Boone? That it? You get your justice, finally." Boone walked closer. "No," he said. "I get something else." Jeb's eyes widened as Boone holstered the revolver. The crowd outside tensed. "I want you to live," Boone said, "with the weight of what you did, with the memory of this night. When they see you in the street, they won't see a leader. They'll see the men who betrayed his own and ran from the storm he made." Jeb shook his head. "I should have shot you in the head." "You did," Boone said, "but you missed the part that mattered." Then he turned his back. The entire saloon held still. No one moved. Even the air dared not stir. Boone stepped through the wreckage and out into the street. Behind him, Jeb dropped to his knees, not from pain, but from everything else. Outside, the sky had darkened. Stars blinked down like witnesses. A wind swept the dust into circles around Boone's boots as he stood beneath the full gaze of the town. He didn't look left or right. He didn't wait for applause. He just kept walking, slow and sure, into the night he'd come from. And somewhere behind him, a saloon door creaked, followed by the sound of one man's breathing, the last man left who still hadn't paid.